waiting for it to show up on YouTube and then I'll introduce you. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to have Kate Ahern here today talking about creating an AAC skills class for users and caregivers. I'll go ahead and give it away to her.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Ahern. I am a special education teacher who has focused on AAC. For the past 25, 30 years, I think. Don't feel like I should admit how long. And for the past several years, since COVID, I have taught exclusively online. I have classes that are open to any AAC user and caregiver in the afternoon, and I also have a homeschool academy that people can sign up for and attend all day as part of their homeschooling program. So one of the things that happened within the paradigm of COVID and figuring out how to support families I worked with who were suddenly at home was the idea that I was going to offer classes. And it started as just offering social groups. And then eventually I added like a story reading group and a morning circle group, even though I'm not a big fan of morning circle. And then eventually I started adding some other classes and activities, some shared writing, and this Talker Power class. So I'm going to be talking to you about AAC skills class, which we call Talker Power. I know that there was a survey done that some adult AAC users don't love the word talker. My students have no problem with it. I've checked in with them, so we call it Talker Power. And my apologies to any adult who doesn't like their device being called a talker, but we go with that. So this is our Talker Power shirts. We love Talker Power so much. Once we started it, we got some t-shirts made, and this is Luke, and he's been in the class from the beginning. And here are some quotes from some different parents. This is a quote from Kadim's mom. Kadim has Angelman syndrome. He uses touch chat. And I won't read the whole thing to you. I'm sure you all can read it on your own. But the mom talks about how much she didn't know that she didn't know about AAC and the things that he and she have learned in the class. And that's similar for what Christy says here about Luke, who you saw a picture of. So Talker Power has been very powerful for my students. And one of the things that makes Talker Power different is it's meant for a dyad. So it's supposed to be a caregiver and a student together. And the classes are specifically taught to the parent and or other caregiver and the AAC user at the same time. And we harness things like playing games to have the caregivers model. So it doesn't look like they're modeling. It looks like we're playing a game, but the parents are modeling within that. So let's talk a little bit about what this caregiver learner dyad AAC skills class looked like. So my thought process behind Talker Power was sort of an experiment. And the idea was, what if I taught specific skills based on the 4 communication competencies by Janice Light? And those are linguistic, so the ability to use language, expressive and receptive; operational, which is the ability to actually use your AAC system, from turning the pages to turning up the volume; social and pragmatic skills, sort of the soft skills of, how to have friends, how to have acquaintances, how to interact with people, and strategic skills, different strategies that you can use to make people understand you, to fix communication repair, and do communication repair when there's a breakdown. And then a couple of different people have written about adding a fifth competency. And one of those people is actually me. And we all sort of have the same competency that we add, but we call it different things. So I called it a self-advocacy competency. Others have made it a self-regulation competency. So I added this fifth competency, and the idea was we'd focus on one competency a day, and we'd have all of the ideas that different people wrote about for a fifth competency. In this class, we called self-strength. And each of these little icons is one of our competencies. So social skills, strategic, operational, self-strength, and linguistic. And that was the idea behind Talker Power. Originally, I was going to make it all gamification, and that didn't end up going anywhere. But the idea of a class that specifically focuses on skills to increase competency was where we started. So the first competency we focus on every Monday is that self-strength, or Myself Monday. And we focus on advocating for physical needs, advocating for safety needs and abuse prevention, things like setting boundaries, things like how do you tell if somebody hurt you, emotional needs, so feelings in ourselves and others, anticipating our emotional needs, asking for help. Within that piece, we use the zones of regulation curriculum, but not the size of the problem. So some people, some autistic activists have said they find size of the problem to really be demeaning. So we don't use that, but we do use the concept of the zones of regulation. We talk a lot about every zone is okay. Everybody is in, everybody goes in the red zone. It's not bad if you're in the red zone. It's about you feeling good, and we feel good in the green zone. And really focusing on making it very aware of neurodiversity and without judgment. And then we also talk about self-image and advocacy. We talk a lot about using self-talk and how do we talk to ourselves with our talkers and, with our thinking voice in our head. Resilience, negotiation, which reminds me that this morning, one of my students said he was waiting for a package from Amazon, and his mother said, "You spent your allowance, there's nothing coming from Amazon." And the student said, "This is non-negotiable," which is something he learned in Talker Power. And of course, I already said we use the zones of regulation. So let's look at some of Talker Power materials for each area, for each competency. I put together this sample Talker Power materials that you can access through the slideshow. So let's look at some of the ones here for Mondays for our self-strength. My computer's been a little slow, so my apologies. So these are coping strategy cards that we practice. We actually practice these throughout the day. Another nice moment that we had this morning was at the end of math class. One of the kids was pulling on his mother's shirt and was clearly dysregulated. And while I was trying to decide, should I step in and address it or let mom handle it, one of the students said the child's name several times and then suggested that he do fist bumps, which is a strategy that the child who was having trouble has told us is one of his favorite strategies for coping. And then as a class, we all did some fist bumps, and the student who was dysregulated became regulated. And, we thanked the student who helped his friend by suggesting a coping strategy. I mean, that kind of moment is just, it was 3 or 4 years in the making, but it's just so powerful to see the kids using these skills and helping each other and the friendships. It just amazes me every day. So here are some of our strategies. We have cupcake breathing. So we smell the frosting and blow out the candle. One of the favorites is 5-finger breathing. You just breathe in when you go up and out when you go down. Fog the glass. So I use my glasses usually, which I don't need them to see the computer. Can't see outside right now, but usually on my glasses for fog the glass. Do the wave, hand squeezes, drink some water, some more movement oriented ones. So those are the coping skills that in that particular lesson. And we actually use that particular slideshow a lot. Another one that's more of a lesson, let's look at this one on coping with change. So this is the materials that I created for dealing with change, and it's a social story. So what we normally do is we read the story together. And after we read it and we talk about, what is a transition, how it can make us feel, things we can do, if we feel upset about change, then we practice asking questions, and then we practice some of our coping skills. And the students, on their devices, practice asking, can I have 5 more minutes? Can you give me choices? I feel upset, or I feel angry, I feel rushed. Tell me the schedule. Please warn me before we change activities. So within the social story are all these skills that we work on explicitly. And those are just 2 possible lessons that we do within the self-strength. On Mondays for the self-strength Monday, we also always start with the zones of regulation song, which the kids love, and they always remind me that we need to do that. And then the kids, and we do that as a review for what are the zones. And then the kids tell me what zone they're in. And if more than 1 or 2 kids are not in the green zone, then we, as a group, choose some coping strategies and from our cards and put them in place before we do whatever the activity for the day is. And as I already told you, one of the big things we do is we play games. So one of our favorite kind of games is spinner games. I use Wheel of Names a lot. I also use online stopwatch a lot. And for this game, simply we would, you spin the spinner, and it's always caregivers versus AAC users, and we make it very competitive. And so the activity might be spin the wheel and act out the feeling. It might be spin the wheel and say that feeling. I feel mad, I feel surprised, I feel safe, I feel excited. And then your team gets a point. So, it might be, okay, everybody, it's the caregiver's turn, or sometimes I'd say it's the helper's turn. Helpers, the score is 3-4. You need to get this to tie the game. And we spin the wheel and say, okay, the feeling is tired. How would you say that you're tired? And then the helpers have to say it on the talker. And I let the helpers know to differentiate based on their kid. So some kids, just finding the word tired is where we're at for our zone of proximal development. So the parent would get them to the feeling page and help them find the word tired through gestures. For other kids, they're perfectly capable of independently making a sentence that says, I feel tired. And that's the expectation for that kid. And the expectation varies based on the kid. And once they get the answer, we get a thumbs up, or I see them doing a high five. And then the caregivers get the point, or the AAC users get the point. And it's always a tie. And then what the kids love is we have sudden death overtime. And in sudden death overtime, the rules are that both the caregivers and the kids are going to play at the same time. and you are allowed to cheat and sabotage. The only rule is you can't hurt anybody. So you'll see the kids stealing talkers from the caregiver, blocking the talker from the caregiver, turning the caregivers, if they have their own talker, turning their volume down, and a very competitive sort of end to the game. And I would say most of the time the AAC users win. And people always tell me it's rigged, and it really isn't. But most of the time the AAC users win. Here's another one. This is coping skills. And so we would spin the wheel and we would say, what zone would you use this coping skill? So what zone would you use deep breaths? You know, a red zone, yellow zone. What zone would you use bouncing? A blue zone, or in the green zone. So that's another type of game we play. Here's another one. So around specific events like Thanksgiving, we do have specific lessons. So for Thanksgiving, we specifically had a lesson for coping skills at Thanksgiving. We discussed with the kids what are some triggers that might happen at Thanksgiving. And the kids had some very, specific things that they were worried about. Some of them were worried that, like, I won't like the food. Some were worried that we have to wait too long to eat, and I don't like to wait to eat. Some of them were worried about, my grandmother always talks to me like a baby, and I don't like that. Some of them, you can see the list of choices here are things that they all said. It's too loud, it's too hot, you're overwhelmed. Someone wants you to eat something you don't like, you want videos, but it's not time, video games, but it's not time. People aren't including you. There are babies there, and either they're too loud or you want to hold them. So we play the game, you spin it, you land on one, and then we would just say, what would you do if someone wants you to eat something you don't like? And the students would, say, maybe they'd say no, maybe they'd say, I don't want to, maybe they'd say, no, thank you. But we practice for those situations so that when Thanksgiving happens, they're kind of prepped for it. Here's another one. What would you do? That's the way the cookie crumbled. So this is, we were working on letting go of small upsets. Small defined by the child as small, not by the adult as small. So I had a list of things that the kids considered to be small upsets. And then they would say, what would you say? What would you do if this happened to you? You made a mistake, you fell down, you spilled something, like, what can you say? And some of the kids had programmed into their devices different phrases, like, that's the way the cookie crumbled. We had just done a unit on France. So one of the kids had "C'est la vie" programmed in. We also play some Jeopardy. So this is Jeopardy Labs, another free site like Wheel of Names. So these are programmed like feelings, I think, said, how would you feel if I forget how it was worded. Coping skills was ask for a certain coping skill with your device. The zone was, what zone are you in if your body feels this way or that way. This name something was, name something that makes you happy, something that makes you angry. And what would you do if was things like, what would you do if. The 500 one was, what would you do if somebody hurt you, which the kids had a hard time with, which means we need to go back and do more reporting abuse stuff with the class. So after the first round of Talker Power, I did some surveys. So it was an N of 14. Here's a list of some of the skills we were intending to cover. We didn't actually get to all of them in the course. And you can see that for a lot, at least, for some of them, specifically self-talk, there was big improvements in some of the skills. And then, like, advocate safety needs, clearly we need more work. Feeling more confident, we needed a little more work, but we did get results. So on Tuesday, we would talk about operational skills. And operational skills are things like turning on your talker, turning off your talker, carrying it, mounting it, knowing when to charge it, knowing how to plug in if you're allowed to plug in, directing others to do these tasks. If so, my eye gaze users, how do you direct somebody? Please plug in my device. Please turn, if you don't have volume built into your page set, how do you say, please turn it up? Same with switch users. So all of these things, navigating pages into programming a button, clear, delete, and sending text messages or posting to social media. And people are at different levels. So, there are kids who are absolutely text messaging from their device. And then when we do that class, we actually spend time, the kids don't love it, but we spend time helping the parents and caregivers set up the ability to text. So that's where the dyad comes together. So let's look at some of the skills that we work on. Here are some of our materials for operational. There's a quiet aloud book about volume and when you need, what volume you want to be at in different situations. Let's take a look at, sorry, I can't see my mouse. There it is. Let's take a look at, why did that? Sorry, technical difficulties. Here we go. Let's take a look at the activity we have for power up and plug it in. So for this activity, we have a little social story about that our talkers run on batteries, that they use energy. Energy makes things go. They get the energy from being plugged into the wall or a battery pack. Accessories, you also need to get energy. You can find out how much battery have you by looking at your battery status. And then we talk about different devices and how to check the battery status. And we talk about, because we have all different AAC systems in the class, we talk about different devices. So on Lamp and Touch Chat, if you touch the status button, it'll tell you how full it is. But in Proloco to Go, you have to look at the button and it shows you, it always looks the same, but it changes what it says based on what the battery is. And we talk about all other devices too. And then we talk about the idea of when do you charge it. So we talk about, 60 to 90, don't worry about it. 30 to 60, be ready to charge, know where your charger is. And if you're going to be going out, charge it. And 30, under 30, you should plug it in. And then we practice asking a helper. And then we went through and we looked at these different charging statuses from different systems. So there's one from a PRC device, from Proloco. I think that's just an iPad in general. Not sure what that one is. Another Proloco. And what the kids would do is they would look at these and tell me, should we plug it in? And that was our game for that day, was should we plug in based on these numbers? This one means it's dead completely. And we talked about handling the frustration if that happens. So that is a sample lesson from charging it. And then it goes into how to plug it in and where it gets plugged in. And we practice finding where it gets plugged in on our devices. We talk about electricity and wall outlets and safety. And during the class, kids discuss with their caregiver, am I allowed to touch the outlet? And then we practice either plugging it in or asking to plug it in. And that's just one example of content that we do for operational. So you can see that we also have, just within the sample materials, we also have quiet and loud, taking care of your talker, delete and clear. The difference between them and when you use them. The kids like that one because we do a game where They try to enter as many words as they can into the talker, and the other one hits delete. And if you were hitting words and I say stop and there's a word in the talker, you win. If you were in charge of delete and it's clear, then you win. And then we do the same thing with the clear instead of the delete to allow them to see the difference. Here's some of our spinner games. This is navigating within the device. So, get to the page where drinks are, get to the page where you find a flower, get to the page where you would find furniture. And we modify it for LAMP and Unity a little bit by saying, because in LAMP and Unity, and speak for yourself, but I don't have any speak for yourself users, it's not arranged by categories the way all the other systems are. So in those systems, we say a sport or say a book. Here's another one about volume. So this is, it lands on the symbol and you have to say, should your volume be loud or quiet? There's a Jeopardy one with questions about finding different categories, handling your message window, parts of speech, which is really a linguistic thing. But I added it to the Jeopardy game because of where we were at in our process. And talk or care, how do you take care of it? And here's, after the first go around of talker power, here's where the kids showed improvement or didn't. So navigating pages was, they did really well. Navigation, including like page back, they did really well. More moderate results in remembering to play the message window and using clear. And then, editing, texting, power on and power off, those needed more work. And because we loop the curriculum now that we've been doing it for 3 years, we've now gone over these things a lot of times. So the next one is Wordy Wednesday, and that is when we talk about linguistic skills. And it's basically your typical language arts class, elementary level language arts class. It's amazing how many AAC users have never heard the word verb, who don't know what a verb is. We use there's a video on YouTube where these kids from like 15 years ago are singing, a verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, you can do it. If you do it, it's a verb. And the kids are funny because they now know that song. But for most of the kids, they know what a verb is. So I can say, I'm sorry, I don't, you said Grogu, I don't know what you mean. I need a verb with that. And then they'll say watch Grogu or saw Grogu or get Grogu. And then I understand what's happening. We do use outtakes of colorful semantics, which is a program in Australia and the UK to make sentences longer. I was worried about using it because it's color coded differently than AAC devices. Turns out the kids don't care. But having the idea of that you say who is doing what, where and when, and so we work on that for our word order. Word order is really tough for many AAC users, so we find that to be really helpful. So for activities for Wednesdays, I have a making sentences one, a verbs past and present, and a colorful semantics one. The colorful semantics one, I'm worried about times, and I want to have time for your questions. So I don't think I'm going to open any of these, but the colorful semantics one is just pictures that I found online, and the kids take turns with their caregivers making sentences about the pictures for points. I guess a question came in, are my materials available for purchase anywhere? Not currently. And I'm sharing everything on this slide. You'll be able to access for free. Everything in the PowerPoint you'll be able to access for free. But part of what makes this class great is making the materials. Let's see, this seems to be geared towards communicators who are already familiar with the device and may not have behavior, attention, academic needs. Do you do this for more complex needs, or is this meant just for more advanced users? My students run the gamut, and I have some who are very simple at a beginning stage, and we differentiate for those students versus more advanced users. I have both in my classes. If you look back at the quotes at the beginning, when I first started with Kadeem, he didn't even have a point. He wasn't able to access his device at all. He had no coping skills. He was not to bash on Kadeem, he's lovely, but his self-regulation was really rough. He couldn't attend to a whole class. He had to take breaks all the time. He was, hitting and pulling hair during class. And we work with kids where they're at. So we, if we need to take a break, we take a break. If a kid needs to shut off their camera and take a minute, they do that. If a student is working on pointing, and we just get them to the page and they can hit anything and we'll call it a right answer. But if there are other kids who are working on long sentences or sending a text message, they do that. So it's completely differentiated. My background is with the kids who are low, the 1% of the 1%. I don't use those words because a lot of the time they're not low. They've faced educational neglect, they're dysregulated, they may have an intellectual disability, but most of the time they just haven't been taught the skills. Yes, you will have access to everything in the slideshow. The slideshow will go up on my website, which is aacvoices.org, under presentations. So you'll be able to access it there, and all of the links will work for you. I love seeing how this has evolved over time since I saw it after the first round. Yes, I have presented on this before. Do I have a comparison between the data now and what you had before? I don't have a comparison because what has ended up happening is right now we have what I call talker power maintenance. So this is a whole curriculum I wrote, and I think I taught it 5 times through. And then pretty much everybody in my classes had already done all the things. So now we do talker power maintenance. So we actually only meet 3 days a week now, partially because, like I said, I've been ill. So every Wednesday I have to be at the hospital for treatments. So we don't have class on Wednesday. And on Fridays, we do our cooking activity instead of talker power. But the other 3 days we do maintenance on the skills we've learned. So it kind of would be comparing apples and oranges to compare the two. But, the kids are progressing, every time we do it, we see more progress. And it's just, they're so impressive and they amaze me. And the kids who, I was told when I got them, when they tried class, I can't even tell you how many parents said to me, my kid's not even going to be able to sit through one class. They're not going to sit for 40 minutes. And at first they didn't. And it was like, just have it on, we'll see if we can get them over to watch for a minute or two. And then slowly they get engaged, they connect with the other kids. They connect with me. I form a relationship with them. They start to attend more. They start to participate more. I can't say that every single student has succeeded or has, learned all these skills or any of the skills. But what I can say is every kid is improved. From the kids who started like Kadeem without even a point, with no access to his device, no idea what to do with it, to kids who came to me with, maybe a little bit of skill, but they weren't doing some of the more advanced things like programming their own buttons, and now they are. So I think people make this assumption that I only take the high functioning kids because of the results I get. No, I don't. I take anybody who signs up. So eye gazers, kids with significant behavioral difficulties, they're all welcome. Most of my class at the moment has Angelman syndrome because I have a specific background in Angelman syndrome, but I also have quite a few students with autism, with Rett syndrome, with cerebral palsy, Phelan-McDermott syndrome, rare syndromes. They're one of 15 in the world or one of 100 in the world. But no, don't make the assumption that I've got high functioning kids, because that's not at all true. So within the linguistics, here's one of our games where in this one, they spin, a picture shows and you describe it. So some kids, you spin, it lands on the picture of the person who's soaking wet and they say wet. Other kids who have more ability might say she is wet. Or some of the kids who like to get fancy might say, you know, she is happy about being wet. So that's how we differentiate from the kids who are really, you know, describe it, it's wet. You know, we get them to the page, we point to the button, we talk about what wet is, they press wet. Other kids are writing full sentences. Here's some of the improvement that we've seen. A lot of improvement with vocabulary, especially with vocabulary, which is what happens when you focus on verbs and what these verbs are and what they mean, and do a bunch of verb activities and do a bunch of describing activities. Some improvement in sentence building, which is using the colorful semantics. Questioning is something that we work on specifically. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work on not starting sentences with the word I, because I noticed a bunch of the kids started every sentence with I, even if that's not what they meant. So in our sort of maintenance talker power, we've been working on starting with you or he. All right, so Thursday is strategy day. Think about it Thursday. So we talk about, and I'll explain this more in a second, we talk about almost always, sometimes, and almost never people. Skills like gaining attention before you talk to somebody, figuring out if you made a mistake and if it's worth it to explain the mistake or just to let people go with the wrong information. You know, we talk about repeat, rephrase, or repair, different strategies to repair. Most people don't know that in a lot of devices, there's a specific page with vocabulary for repairing. In Proloquo, it's called clues, but a lot of them have it. If you're in Word Power and you've added the Jill Center and Matt Baum pragmatic add-on that you can download for free by going to Talk, TALC. I Google usually pragmatic add-on, TALC, Jill Center, and it gets to the website and you can download a pragmatic add-on and it has a repair section in it for anybody using Word Power and some of the cough drop vocabs. Using words not here, knowing how to switch modalities. We spent a lot of time just working on doing this. You know, if you're going to make a message and you want someone to wait, doing this before you make your message, and when to try to spell something. Let's see. Is this a group where parents choose to participate, or is this through the student school system? So the way that I run this group is it's online, it's on Zoom, so it's kids from all over the world, USA, Canada, France, Germany, England, Dubai, all over the world. So parents choose to participate. Seems like something that could be done within the school setting. I think it absolutely could be adapted for within the school setting. My lessons are 40 minutes long, but I give people 5 minutes to get there. So now it's a 35-minute lesson. We spend 5 minutes, sometimes a little more, on a hello song, 2 minutes on a goodbye song. So, you know, it ends up being a 25-ish minute lesson. I think that it absolutely could be adapted for a school setting, but the important thing I want to say is I think it is absolutely vital that it be the caregiver and the child. I think that while you could teach this in your classroom without caregivers, I do not think it'd be very effective. I think the caregivers learning how to do all these things with their kids and learning how to explain these things to their kids and learning where their kids are at is vital. Our, 30 hours a week with the kids is not enough. And that's as teachers, as speech therapists, your 1 hour a week is not enough. We need the parents to know how to do this. We need the parents to learn all these things and learn how to work with their child and be ready to teach themselves. So I absolutely would do it at a school, but I would invite caregivers to come in and be there for the lessons. And I did 5 days a week because that's our program, but you could certainly do, 6 weeks, once a week, that's just on the Monday, and then you could do once a week for another 6 weeks. That's just operational skills. I mean, you could reframe it however you need to make it work for your setting. Here are some of the games for, where was I? I'm sorry. For strategic skills. You know what? This slide should have been there and it wasn't. So let's take a look at one of my favorite concepts that I teach my students. And let's take a look at it really fast because we are almost out of time. So, and didn't work. Let's try again. Wonder if I didn't set up the link. I didn't. That's okay. I'll just talk about it. So most of the time, some of the time, and almost never people is one of my favorite concepts that I teach the kids within the strategic day. And that's the idea that there are people in your life. Some of those people are most of the time people. They understand you most of the time. They get you. You can use gestures, you can use vocalizations, you can use eye pointing, you can use your device. They will probably understand at least most of what they're saying because they're most of the time people. And these are people like your mother. And then I have the kids list who their most of the time people are. Sometimes people who sometimes get what you're saying, maybe your teacher, your brother, but you need to be ready to use your talker if they're not getting your other modalities. And then almost never people are people that even if you see them every day, they don't know anything about how you communicate and they're not going to understand if you vocalize or gesture or eye point. So you need to be ready to use your AAC system to communicate with them. And we work on sorting into these groups and who's in what group. And then we work on, which way are you going to communicate with different people? And this has really helped the kids because most of the kids have this idea that either they only use their devices with their always people and they don't even try with sometimes and almost never people, or they, start gesturing and pointing and making their vocalizations with sometimes and almost never people, and they don't understand why those people don't understand. So that has been a very helpful concept in the class that we've done. So here's a game. What is this game? Always, sometimes, never. So and this one, it's you spin and your teachers, are they an always, sometimes, or never person? A shoe salesman, your doctor, your dad, your mom. And the kids are pretty good. Like even kids who, are not the kids who you would think would understand something this complex, they can tell you who knows what they're saying and who doesn't. And, and they'll throw people under the bus. My dad's always an almost never person, or and even me. So when we first time I taught this, I was a sometimes person for almost everybody, and now for some of the kids I'm an almost always person. But there are times we'll be like, no, Miss Kate, you were just a sometimes person. You don't get it right as much as you think you do. Okay. Here's another one. This is our repair game. I teach 5 strategies for repair. Asking for help, using a strategy, calming down, taking a breath, and trying again. Elsa is for let it go. Like what I was telling you wasn't that important. I don't feel like repairing it. So that's another game. And here's the improvements that we've seen. The biggest improvement was in repeating when misunderstood and sort of that perseverance. And also gaining attention before speaking, which, when we teach that, I have the caregivers be on their phones and we work on, you tap, tap, tap on the shoulder, or you can vocalize or say, I have something to say with your device. And these are important skills that really need to be explicitly taught that we often don't explicitly teach. And then finally, on Fridays, we talk about social skills. And those are things like greeting, taking leave, introducing yourself, staying on topic, taking turns, giving compliments, sarcasm, how to tell a joke. One thing I do want to mention here is the way I teach this is some people expect. So I might say some people expect eye contact. Do you feel comfortable giving eye contact? If you do, that's something you could do to make a better social connection. If you don't, let's practice what we say. And the kids have learned to say, or they have pre-programmed buttons that say, I'm listening, I feel more comfortable not looking at you, which is a way to honor the diverse social expectations, both across disability group and across cultural groups. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rushing right now, but there are some materials here, sample materials. One is jokes, which is one of the kids' favorite lessons. Actually, we're to a point now in maintenance talker power where periodically, like, my computer will freeze or the doorbell will ring and I have to step away and I'll say to the class, so-and-so, do you want to be in charge? I want you to tell jokes while I go answer the doorbell. And they will. They'll, and when I get back, they're still telling jokes and taking turns with jokes, which is amazing. How to handle people being rude. So this is a little video clip that I can only open on Facebook. So let's take a peek at this video. This little boy is Fronic, and didn't open. It is opening. Okay. His name is Fronic. He's from Toronto, Canada. And this was the very first day that we learned about jokes, and we learned about gotcha jokes. And one of the gotcha jokes we learned like made you look, and that sort of gotcha joke. So he's doing the joke where you tell something, they have something on their shirt, and then you flick them in the nose. And you can just see how happy he is and the connection he has with his dad. And I mean, it's just such a small thing, but he did need it to be explicitly taught. He needed to be taught, this is what the joke looks like. This is how it looks, between two people. This is how you do it. And then he practiced it with his family. And here's some of the social skills improvements. So greeting, taking leave and departing. This was huge because we are a virtual class. The kids sometimes FaceTime each other or with other relatives, and it was during COVID. And they all would hang up on FaceTime without saying goodbye. So that was a big thing we worked on. Asking about other people was really tough. We worked on that a lot. The joking obviously was very important. Here is, and I'm sorry we're out of time, and I'm also sorry it's so tiny, but I wanted it in the slideshow for people to look at. This is the grid of what we did when. So this started as an 8-week program, then it became a 13-week program. And these are all the topics each day. So on Monday, when we talk about emotional regulation and self-advocacy, we start with zones of regulation, identifying emotions, zones of regulation strategies, self-talk, your disability, and what to do when your disability is interrupting you. So if your disability is telling you to obsess about something, for some of the kids with Angelman, it's food, to obsess about food, what are your choices? And talking about, like, I can tell my brain to stop, I can take the thought out of my head and put it aside, dealing with change. And the list is here for all of them. So if you're going to write your own class, you can certainly, this is a great place to look at the different things that I covered and then decide if they're appropriate for your students. And hold on, let me get back to the slideshow. All right. So here, I'm not going to go into this, but here is some data that just shows what skills improved over time. There's quite a few slides. You can look at them on my website. One of my favorite slides, this asks the caregivers, do you feel more confident teaching and reinforcing communication? And we get 100%. And the big takeaways are, I think, including caregivers as a dyad was vital. I think that's the most important thing I learned with this group. Making it fun, songs, game, breakout rooms. Kids love breakout rooms, but if you're doing Zoom, and even if you're in person, if you send 2 kids to a corner and have them practice asking each other questions or have them practice setting a boundary, they love doing that. Repetition with variety. I spelled repetition wrong. We'll just fix that. So when something like that happens in class, what I say is, I made a mistake. I don't like making mistakes. All right, what coping skill do I want to use? I think I'm going to use self-talk. Oh, well, everybody makes mistakes. I'll just fix it. And I do that out loud anytime something like that happens. Sometimes when something is really ticking me off, I'll say to the kids, this is making me really angry. What do you think I should do? And they'll give suggestions. Have a drink, Miss Kate. Which is not the kind of drink that I would want to have, but or take deep breaths. So repetition with variety. So practice skills in different ways and then keep going. We had the question that this seemed like it was for kids who had more AAC skills. Well, they didn't at the beginning. They have more AAC skills now because we kept going. We started small and we built up. And that is it. And we are out of time. And I wish I had more time for questions.
Okay, I think we were able to hit all of the questions except for
As
one
we
that
went.
Yeah, as we went. But one just came in. What ages typically attend the classes? Is there a max age cutoff?
So no, I have no max age cutoff right now. We have ages 6 to 22 or 23 in the class. I say no to younger. I'll accept starting at age 5, but it's tough for the little kids because the concepts are pretty abstract. As much as we differentiate them, they can be pretty abstract. But if somebody was 30 wanted to come, I wouldn't say no. So
thank you. As always, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Participants, thank you. And have a good conference.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Kate.